Hi everyone, I'm Dr.Animaction. Welcome to the makeup video for my animated 80s and 90s video series. As much as I hate to admit it, I do occasionally make mistakes, and this video will be my opportunity to make up for any of them that happened during this series. I also thought I'd take the opportunity to go over the surprising number of shows that turned out to be false starts over both decades, and took the form of either failed premieres or rejected pitches, with the caveat being they actually had something produced in the form of a pilot or demo that we in the public got to see. Kind of a what could have been situation. I wanted to do this one before the animated 90s wrap-up and summary so that we could get a truly full picture of the decade, so look for the summary video between the holidays and New Year's. Also, once you're done watching, go check out the channel's playlist section, as I put intros for all of these in their own list, but I also put all the failed pilots into a list for you to check out as well. And lastly, before we get started, I've got some holiday content coming in the form of viewing guides covering a variety of holiday topics that should give you enough to watch to keep you busy until this time next year, so look for the first of those probably tomorrow. That should cover all the admin and updates, so let's get to the cartoons. So I ended up missing, to the best of my knowledge, 23 series across the 2 decades of videos. On average, that means I only missed about 1.15 shows per year, which is pretty good considering the several hundred we talked about. Anyway, let's start with the furthest year back here and make our way forward. The first show I need to make up for aired on CBN Satellite Network in 1981, and although I normally wouldn't cover satellite-based shows since they can pretty much include everything, this one was on a network that eventually moved to cable. It was a dubbed version of the Japanese series Little Women, which if you've watched any of the few animated 80s Japan edition videos I've made so far, you may recognize. The show is essentially a fairly faithful adaptation of Louisa May Alcott's 1868 and 9 duology of novels, Little Women. This one came from Toei Animation, the company that would eventually bring us Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon, and ran for a total of 26 episodes over its run. I did pretty good for the next couple of years, but then missed another pair of imports in 1984. The first of these was a failed initial attempt to bring Teekamman the Space Knight to the US. This version was picked up, dubbed, and distributed by a small company called William Winkler Productions, and managed to find its way into syndication this year. It was a more faithful adaptation of an anime than some of the others we'd gotten up until this point, like Battle of the Planets and Star Blazers, and not only tried to keep the shows mostly unedited, but also retained the original Japanese soundtrack. The series was destined for failure on both sides of the ocean, though, having only gotten 26 of its planned 52 episodes in Japan when it came out there in 1975, and only 13 of those got translated and aired here. We'd have to wait until the mid-90s to see another version of Teekamman in the US. The other series I missed in '84 was another one that should be familiar from the animated 80s Japan edition, as it's a series from there that adapted another novel, this time one from French author Cécile Aubry. Belle and Sebastian was written in 1965 and told the adventures of a boy and a giant Great Pyrenees dog named Belle. The pair set off for Spain after Belle's falsely accused of attacking people in their native southern French village, and the show tracks that journey across a 52-episode run on Nickelodeon that started this year. Oh, and it was produced by Toho, which is a name any Godzilla fans out there will likely recognize. Moving on to 1985, we have a single series I missed this year as well, which is another Japanese import that came to Nickelodeon. This one was originally a 1978 series called The Adventures of the Little Prince from Knack Productions, again based on a French book from 1943 written by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I have no idea how to actually pronounce that, so that was just my best fake guess. This series tells the story of a spacefaring little prince as he finds his way to adventures on various other planets, including Earth, by hitching a ride with passing comets. I don't really have much else to talk about with this one, as it's kind of just an adventure of the episode type story. It ran for a total of 39 episodes, and I'll mention that Discotech Media has the rights to it now, which is cool. They've been doing modern releases of a lot of somewhat obscure displaced properties over the past several years, and I'm a huge fan of their efforts. Anyway, I made it through 1986 unscathed, but then forgot yet another series that Nickelodeon brought over from Japan in 1987, called The Adventures of the Little Koala. This was a series from Studio Topcraft, who would in a roundabout way go on to become Studio Ghibli, that aired in Japan in 1984. It was a slice-of-life series that focused on a group of koala friends and their daily lives in Australia, oddly for a cartoon of the time, setting it in a real piece of Australian geography, highlighted by the landmark rock formation called the Bread Knife. The series only had a 26-episode run, but not only did Nickelodeon air it here in '87, but they moved it to Nick Jr. when the channel launched in '88 and kept it on there until 1993. I managed to hit everything in '88 as far as I can tell, but had another miss in 1989. I'm sure that you'll all be surprised to hear the show I skipped over this time was, wait for it, a Japanese series that came to Nickelodeon. Shocking, right? Anyway, this time it was Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics, which ran for a total of 24 episodes. I thought I'd never heard of this one, but while researching and collecting material for this video, I watched the intro and could immediately sing along to the theme song. It's weird how much stronger music is in a memory than images. Anyway, I think I recall this being one of those Sunday afternoon shows that I'd watch because there was never anything else on anywhere, and each episode told a different fairy tale from the Brothers Grimm. Ironically, the theme song promised a happy ending for each of them as well, which is absolutely not in keeping with the original stories. Moving on to 1990 brings another pair of series that I missed, both of which were indeed from Japan, but only one of them came to Nickelodeon this time. That series was called Maya the Honeybee, or just Maya the Bee here, not to be confused with the CGI show of the same name that came out in 2012. This series instead originally came out in 1975 from Nippon Animation and was brought over this year with a new dub by Saban Entertainment. Based on a children's book by German author Waldemar Bonsels, the series is really pretty deep for a show about bees, and is set during kind of a civil war where an upset in the hive has caused the population to split. Maya essentially runs away and becomes an exile, making friends with other insects and even thwarting plots by hornets to destroy her original home. It ran for 52 episodes across 3 years on Nick and as part of its early Nick Jr. programming. My other 1990 omission was, as I said, another Japanese import, but one that came to HBO. Actually, it was another version of Little Women, called Tales of Little Women, and this time came from an original 1987 release from Nippon Animation. The series was about the exact same thing I already described in the previous Little Women series, so feel free to go listen to that one again if you want. Well, okay, not exactly the same, because unlike that series, this one ran for a significantly longer 48 episodes and is told as something of a set of prequel stories to the original novels, rather than that series' straight adaptation. So the following year, 1991, I managed to miss 4 series, and yes, lest you had any doubt, they were all from Japan. I'm not making excuses, but sometimes it got pretty hard matching up these imported series to certain years or air dates. Okay, so I guess I am making excuses, but I think they're pretty valid ones. I just happened to get a little better at research as I went along. Well, I say that, but wait until we get to 1998. Anyway, let's dig into this quartet of misses with The Little Bits, which was an Americanized version of the Japanese series Cheerful Dwarfs of the Forest, Belphie and Lilybit. The original series released in Japan in 1982 and came from Studio Tatsunoko, famous for Speed Racer and various superhero anime. This wasn't like any of those, though, and instead follows a group of tiny young forest people who mostly have names ending in bit, hence the title. The series follows a group of friends named Lilybit, Willybit, Snagglebit, Brownybit, and, Chip, as they explore the forest, have adventures, and actively engage in village politics. Yeah, it's weird. It aired for 26 episodes, also as part of the Nick Jr. programming lineup. The other 3 from this year actually weren't on Nickelodeon, though, and we'll move over to CBS for the next one. Hello Kitty and Friends was made from dubbing and combining selections from a series of 80 different Hello Kitty OVAs, or original video animations, and released on CBS as 28 episodes of a regular half-hour series. It's another slice of life story, just one that's done with Sanrio characters. I actually thought I'd covered this one, but I didn't see it in my notes, so I guess not. Weird, since I did manage to include the earlier Hello Kitty Fairy Tale Theater. Oh well. The last 2 series from 1991 were both released in syndication this year, and the first was another one brought to our shores by Saban Entertainment with their version of The Little Mermaid. This one was actually a French-Japanese co-production between Saban and Fuji TV, though, to capitalize on Disney's Little Mermaid, and its ridiculous success in theaters when it released in 1989. Unfortunately for Saban, Disney also wanted to capitalize on that success and released a Little Mermaid animated series of its own. You can probably guess which of the 2 fared better. The series only managed a 26-episode run, and I'd imagine we'll never see it again, as now it's owned by Disney after the acquisition of Fox Worldwide. It's a shame, too, because this was a fun and significantly different version than what Disney brought us, with much more of the original Hans Christian Andersen feel. But finally, from 1991, I also forgot a piece of Akira Toriyama goodness that's not Dragon Ball, but rather Dragon Warrior. This one was an adaptation of the original Japanese series Dragon Quest, Legend of the Hero Abel, from 1989. Which was based on the hugely popular Dragon Quest video games and again translated and brought across by Saban. The original Japanese version was produced by Studio Comet and ran for 43 episodes. Here in the US, though, it was dumped into a Zero Dark 30 time slot and probably would have been forgotten. Maybe it was fortunate for the series that Akira Toriyama sued the producers because they changed the credits and didn't include him. It ended its run here after just 13 episodes. I almost made it through 1992, but there was a tokusatsu series from that year that I missed. To be fair, I hadn't really started considering tokusatsu until Mighty Morphin Power Rangers came along next year, but once I did, I guess I should go back and do this one in hindsight. It was the 10th entry into the Ultram Man series, and the first of the Heisei era with Ultram Man Great, over here known as Ultram Man Toward the Future. The original version was actually a co-production between Japan and Australia, and believe it or not, aired here in the US before it did in Japan. It did get a Laserdisc release there in 1990 though, but it didn't get network play until 1995. Even more bizarre is the fact that it didn't release in Australia at all. Either way though, we got 13 episodes of it here in syndication this year. No misses in 1993, but another pair of them to talk about in 94, including another Ultraman series I forgot about. In my defense though, the US rights holder forgot about it too, so that must count for something, right? This time it was an English dub of the second Ultraman series with 1967's Ultra 7, here written out as Ultra with the number 7, instead of in Japan where it's just Ultra 7, all in, letters. If you want to count Ultra Q and consider this the third series instead, then go ahead. That's a fight you can have with a bigger Ultraman nerd than me. Anyway, the series was originally brought over here by Turner Program Services in 1985 for a US release, but they decided to redub it instead of using the existing dub from the Hawaiian branch of Tsuburaya Productions. Unfortunately, the folks at Turner weren't very happy with it and shelved the whole series. Someone remembered it existed almost a decade later though, and all 49 episodes aired on TNT starting this year. The other one I missed from 94, and you're probably not going to believe this, didn't come from Japan. Instead, it was a 1989 Canadian series that HBO began airing this year called Stop the Smoggies. Airing. I didn't even mean to do that. Anyway, this one is about a trio of environmentally unfriendly treasure hunters called the Smoggies, as they try a scheme-of-the-moment approach to steal magic coral from the nature-loving Suntots. Each episode had the villains being defeated and their plans stopped, accompanied by an environmentalist message, which is ironic since it was released in the US by the same company responsible for Captain Planet. It was based on the original series simply titled Smoggies and was produced by animation studio Sinar, which is better known today as defunct studio Cookie Jar, and ran for 52 episodes. 1995 was another win for me with no miss series, but Japan strikes again in 1996 with Samurai Pizza Cats. This one was adapted from the original Tatsunoko anime Cat Ninja Legend Tandy, and told the story of 3 superpowered anthropomorphic cats in power armor in an anachronistic sort of take on Tokyo that work in a pizzeria. They're hired in secret by the commander of the Royal Guard to stop a plot by a council member to overthrow the emperor. So, normal anime stuff. The US version of the show made it even more nonsensical than the original though, and provided a pretty humorous take over its run, which consisted of 52 of the original 54 episodes in syndication. I won again with a no-miss 97, but then I stumbled big in 1998.
You have dropped so many balls, man.
Somehow, and I have really no explanation for this, I missed almost the entire lineup of the CBS Kids Show programming block, with 5 whole series that I didn't cover. Oh, and a 6th as well, but not from that particular block, just from the year. I'm actually going to run through these kind of quick, since I've got some other things to get to in this video, so let's do them rapid fire like. First is Anatol, based on a children's book by author Yves Titus about a French mouse who works as a night watchman at a cheese factory, and is a slice of life with his large family and his adventures on watch. It ran for 26 episodes, which actually applies to all of these CBS Kids Show series except Birds, which only got 13. Birds was about an anthropomorphic bird, obviously, that wants to be a filmmaker and so films everything he does, like the setup for a found-footage horror movie. But nope, it's just a slice of life. Oh, and a side note on this one, it uses the song Surfin' Bird by the Trashmen for its theme, so I had that episode of Family Guy stuck in my head for hours after researching it.
Oh, have you not heard? It was my understanding that everyone had heard.
Heard what? Brian, don't!
Oh, well, a bird.
Next in this block is a series called Flying Rhino Junior High, which is about a group of kids in a school haunted by a genius who got a D in shop class and built a reality warping machine that he uses to create trouble for everyone as revenge for his low grade. Each episode sees them transported to a different reality or infested with monsters or whatever other antics the writers could come up with. Next in the block is the series The Dumb Bunnies, which is based on a series of books from the author of Captain Underpants, Dave Pilkey, and is exactly what it says on the wrapper. An episodic series of antics by a family of truly dumb bunnies. And that's enough said about that, so we'll move on to the last and best series from this block with Mythic Warriors Guardians of Legend. This one is an anthology series based on Greek mythology that tells a different story in each episode about people like Perseus, Odysseus, Andromeda, and Heracles, or Hercules if you want to be romantic about it. It was a pretty well done series with good characterization and more faithfully adhered to the original Greek myths instead of some of the friendlier versions we got in a lot of other animation. I'm relatively new to this one, having recently watched it on Tubi, but I highly recommend it. To keep this rolling though, I'll quickly hit on the other series I missed from 1998. my single miss from 1999, and then we'll move on. The other 98 series I skipped over was a preschool-oriented show called Roly Poolie. It was a CGI series that aired on the Disney Channel for 78 episodes across 6 seasons and followed Oli and his family in slice-of-life scenarios. I watched this one a lot because my own kids enjoyed it, but the best part of the series is the theme song, which has that tinny phonograph sound like something out of BioShock. And finally, the last series I'll own up to having missed, as it's the last one I could verify that I missed, is a British and French co-production cartoon called 64 Zoo Lane that came over to Noggin this year. It's about a 7-year-old girl that lives next door to a zoo and makes friends with the animals, who take turns telling her a story every night. Basically, a preschool life lesson story starring talking animals that have been subjugated and locked in cages. It ran for 104 episodes, and I'm confident most of you don't care, but for completeness' sake, I wanted to mention it. Before moving on, let's do a quick rundown of where you can watch these series as of December 2023. I'm sure you're tired of hearing this by now, but there are a lot of them that you can't, at least not in any official release capacity. This group includes Little Women, the one from 1981, Teekamman the Space Knight, Belle and Sebastian, well, unless you speak Spanish that is, because there's a pretty cheap Spanish release out there, Adventures of the Little Koala, Saban's Adventures of the Little Mermaid, Little Bits, Dragon Warrior, Hello Kitty and Friends, Ultram Man Toward the Future, Ultra 7, or the TNT dub of it at least, since the original Ultra 7 is pretty easy to get a hold of, and Stop the Smoggies. I do know that several of these are on YouTube in various states, so take a look there. For official streaming, Tubi comes in strong for this group with Anatol, Birds, Flying Rhino Junior High, Mythic Warriors, Guardians of Legend, and the Dumb Bunnies all available, with Mythic Warriors and Anatol also on Pluto. Peacock has Samurai Pizza Cats, Disney Plus has Roly Poolie, Crunchyroll has The Adventures of the Little Prince, which is also available on a relatively cheap out-of-print DVD, and Roku's subscription service has Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics. Tales of Little Women, Maya the Bee, and 64 Zoo Lane are on Prime, though that last one requires a subscription. And that's about it though, with no real DVDs currently available for any of these other than the aforementioned original Ultra 7. So best of luck in your searching. Speaking of mentioning things for completeness' sake, there was a pretty major crossover event in 1996 that I didn't bring up, but which has been suggested to me that I do. The event took place across 4 different series set in the USA Action Extreme Team programming block, and shared a protagonist called the Warrior King, who appeared in each of the 4. The series in question were Street Fighter, with its Warrior King episode, Savage Dragon, in the episode Endgame, Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm's Resurrection episode, and the Wing Commander Academy's Recreation episode. Things start in Street Fighter, when the mythical Warrior King's orb of power is lost to a vortex while he fights off an invasion by a group of evil mages. Chasing after the orb, both he and it end up in Shadaloo, where Bison takes possession of the artifact and threatens to destroy the world. The Street Fighters leap into action, and Chun-Li is the first on the scene, where she meets and falls in love with the Warrior King. They beat Bison, but another vortex appears, and so he's off to the next episode. World, I guess. That next world is the Chicago of the Savage Dragon, where the Fiend finds said orb, and the Warrior King shows up to help Dragon and Alex defeat him before, leaping through another vortex to the Earth realm of Mortal Kombat. Of course, the orb is never found by good guys, and here it falls into Shao Kahn's hands, who resurrects Shang Tsung and gives it to him to control the weather and defeat Raiden. The Earthrealm warriors are trapped and can't help, but Raiden still manages to win and throw the sphere into space. I'm not sure what the Warrior King was up to in this episode. Wherever he was, though, next he's in space where the crew of the Tiger Claw finds him floating. The orb turns a barren planet into one full of life, kind of like the Genesis project from Star Trek II, which is convenient since the Warrior King is voiced by Commander Worf, and the crossover ends with him flying off to wherever he felt like going. There really wasn't anything super cool about the storyline itself, but the fact that it tied 4 very unrelated series together was at least noteworthy. If you want to watch the crossover yourself, check my 1996 episode of the animated 90s for the SOS on these series. Before I close out this video, there was one other little aspect of these 2 decades I wanted to talk about for a few minutes. There are generally a lot more shows pitched to executives and decision makers than we ever get to see on the air from year to year, and it's no different for cartoons. This section is going to go over a bunch of those that either had a single episode shown on the air, or a TV movie that was meant to be a pilot, or even a couple that were made behind the scenes and we finally got to see several years later. Here's a fairly brief walk through some of what could have been over these 20 years, from oldest to newest. The oldest one takes us all the way back to the beginning of this video series with the 1980 pilot for a show called Carlton, Your Doorman, which was a spin-off of the 1974 live-action sitcom Rhoda, which was itself a spin-off of The Mary Tyler Moore Show. The pilot aired on CBS as a one-time special presentation on May 21st, 1980, but didn't get picked up as a full series. Then, in 1983, someone had the brilliant idea to make the Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin-headed Coneheads from Saturday Night Live into an animated series. Rankin Bass produced a single episode, voiced by the original actors from the sketches, that aired one time on October 14, 1983, as an animated special when it wasn't picked up as a series. In 1986, Disney tried to launch a new show to go along with the adventures of the Gummy Bears, and aired an hour-long animated special called Fluffy Dogs on Thanksgiving of this year. Unfortunately for them, the special got pretty dismal ratings, and so was never moved forward to the planned series. 1987 actually had a couple of series born in the toy aisle try and fail to get some traction. The first of these was Barbie and the Rockers, which was based on a new line within the famous Dolls toy line. A mini-series called Barbie and the Rockers Out of This World was developed by Deke to support the toys, but because they and Mattel couldn't settle on a contract for the full series, the mini was packed into an animated special and released by Mattel in syndication on September 27th of this year. For their part, Deke took the work they'd already done and changed it up to become the series Maxie's World, which was sponsored by and became a toy line from Hasbro. The other toys that made an attempt at animated stardom this year were the Mad Balls, which were simply a series of rubber balls molded into the shapes of strange and grotesque heads. These guys got a pair of episode-length VHS releases this year from Nelvana. The first, called Escape from Orb, which just to cover my bases may have come out in '86, and its follow-up named Gross Jokes. It's potentially a toss-up whether there was ever meant to be a series, but even if there was, the videos didn't do well enough to warrant one. There were another pair that emerged in 1989, one of which I covered in the 1992 video. Pride of the X-Men was the first attempt at an X-Men animated series and premiered on September 16th of this year in syndication. It featured a couple of notable differences from the series we eventually got, though, with Shadowcat and Dazzler as main characters and an Australian accented Wolverine. But it shared an aesthetic and art style, not to mention character roster, with the phenomenal X-Men arcade game. Even though the animation in it was pretty great, it was a lot cheesier than what we'd get a few years later, though. The other false start this year came from Bakshi Productions in the form of the series Houndtown, which used most of the same animation team from New Adventures of Mighty Mouse. Based on watching the pilot, this one was probably made for adults, which is no surprise coming from Ralph Bakshi, but the pilot never got picked up as a series. Honestly though, I can't even verify if it ever made it on the air, though it is rumored to have done so. We didn't actually get a pilot in 1991, but we got a commercial for a pilot that never appeared. A show called Doozy Bots popped up in a couple of ads and was going to be an attempt to bring Gundam SD here to the US. It never manifested though, so we have to make do with low-quality rips of said commercial. These things just keep coming in twos though, and we got another pair in 1992. The first was based on everyone's favorite controller-throwing, teeth-grinding test of patience, Battletoads. This game was so lovably hateable and packed with over-the-top, more disgusting versions of the Ninja Turtles that it was begging for a cartoon. It got one this year from Deke that hit the air in syndication over Thanksgiving weekend. It had some decent hype too, with a fairly visible ad campaign in video game magazines. Unfortunately, it was a prequel to a game where the main draw was gross frogs hit things and didn't get enough attention to make it a series. The other one that tried this year was another video game-based pilot from Deke for the game Defenders of Dynatron City. The pilot made the air as part of Fox Kids on February 22nd and had some good talent behind it, with both Whoopi Goldberg and Tim Curry Space! Doing voices, but it never made it past that first episode. Companies weren't done trying to milk the video game cash cow though, and one of the failed series from 1993 was based on another one. Fortunately for us, the game it was based on was Bubsy, which means not getting it as a series really isn't that bad. What we got though was a single episode from the company that brought us Voltron and Saber Rider, surprisingly enough, that was paid for by Taco Bell and syndicated as part of Bobot Kids' Day Off block on Thanksgiving. Of course it wasn't picked up though, seeing as, well, it's Bubsy. This year's other false start was an attempt to bring over the anime Saint Seiya, a decade before we'd eventually get Knights of the Zodiac. A pilot for an adaptation called Guardians of the Cosmos was made, not picked up as a series, and promptly disappeared. It was pretty much forgotten about until a documentarian turned it up again in 2022. Speaking of failed anime adaptations, the only series to really talk about in 1994 is a misguided attempt by Saban to Americanize Sailor Moon. Sarcastically mocked by fans using the title Saban Moon, the series completely ignored the concept of if it's not broke, don't fix it, and tried to apply a very thin layer of Sailor Moon paint over a decidedly Western cartoon. The 10-minute pilot for the series popped up back in 2022, thanks to that same documentarian who found the last one, a YouTuber named Raymona. Now, I'm not counting all of the shorts from series like Liquid Television or Kablam or any similar shows here, since quite a few of those didn't get picked up, But there was one that I wanted to give special mention to from 1995. Nina and the Count was a series that appeared as a pilot show this year on Cartoon Network's What a Cartoon, but rather than getting picked up as a series, managed to somewhat continue as a recurring segment of that show's follow-up series, Oh Yeah! It ended up with a total of 6 shorts, but was never able to find that traction it needed to reach full series status. The last two I want to talk about both came in 1999, and the first was called Terry Toons Presents Curbside with Heckle and Jekyll. Conceived as a way to reintroduce characters from the Terry Toons roster, the series tried to leverage the same talk show concept as Space Ghost Coast to Coast. Also like that show, it completely misrepresented the characters that it featured, but unlike that show, didn't get picked up for a series. And the last failed pilot I wanted to mention was a new concept from the creator of Ren and Stimpy called Hee-Hog the Atomic Pig. This one was co-produced by MTV Animation and was originally going to be on USA before they changed their minds, and then MTV before they changed their minds. Why, you may ask, did they do that? Well, it's probably got something to do with how over-the-top and blatantly offensive the series was, which is why not only did the pilot disappear until sometime around 2013, but even then when it did pop up, it itself was an edited version. So there you go, a little bonus of 16 different series that we were pretty close to getting throughout the 80s and 90s. Even though we didn't, however, I've got good news.
Good news, everyone!
All of these pilots are still around and can be watched today, and I've put together the playlists that you can go check out to do just that. Viewer discretion advised, I guess. I haven't really watched them all. And there you have it. Some targets I missed, some series that missed the target, and the true end of my comprehensive coverage of both the 80s and 90s, I think. Read through the comments on this video, because if there's anything else I'm still missing, theoretically someone will mention it there. Like I said, I'm shifting to some holiday content for a few days. Less than I'd planned, but this video took significantly longer than I expected, and I'll get the 90s summary out after the 25th. Also look for the last part of Hanna-Barbera between Christmas and New Year's, and maybe some other stuff. Make sure to check out my writing and designs for some excellent geeky holiday gifts, and like and subscribe for more cartoon goodness. I've got some big plans in the new year, so I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned, and stay tuned, as in cartoons. Later.